So now, guys, we get to put this all together to actually use this experience to start work on the project that you need to create. So essentially what you're going to be doing is laying out your photographic images of letter forms onto an A3 page. We'll do that all on one layer. We will then create another layer in Illustrator where you'll do your vector tracings. And we'll also have another layer in there as well, which indicates where certain measurements are for your typography. So we're going to be indicating things like the baseline, the X height, the caps height, those sorts of things too, which are requirements of your brief. You will be doing an A3 printout of these. So to get started on this project, I would suggest you make a new document in Illustrator, and in the print section of presets, if you can't immediately see an A3, try viewing all the presets. You should be able to get an A3 out of that. If you can't, remember the measurements for A3 are 297 by 420 millimeters. We're going to go for a landscape orientation. It'll probably make it a bit easier because you are doing an entire alphabet. And then we can create that document. So from here, what we're going to do is start placing in those images of the letter forms that you've been photographing over the course of this semester. Your photographs are going to be raster graphics, that is made of pixels, and Illustrator is a vector graphics program, so you can't really edit those images or do many manipulations to them in Illustrator. So if you need to crop those images down or fix them up in any way, you really should take them into Photoshop first and do that there. Once you have those images, you can simply go to File and Place, just like you would in InDesign. However, there's a different shortcut for that in Illustrator. The shortcut is Shift-Control-P for that one. Shortcut I usually forget, but there you go. I'm just going to locate where I've saved some. I don't have a full alphabet here. I'm just going to give you a couple of examples. I've also got some upper and some lowercase. You were instructed to get a whole lowercase alphabet or a whole uppercase alphabet, and that will affect how you proceed with this slightly, but not by too much. Cool. So I'll get my first lowercase layer here. You would probably start with the letter A, of course, and just do it all in alphabetical order. I don't have all my letters, so I'm just going to run in the order that I have. So I'll take that. When you place that, you can click once to put that in your document. You might have fairly large images. It depends on what you've been taking photos of and what you've been taking photos of with. But you can, in Illustrator, make your images bigger or smaller, just like you would a vector object if you need to. Remember, you'll have to fit all 26 characters on the page, so just bear that in mind when you put this in. This will chuck your first image in. You'll notice that the image has a cross over it. That means it's a placed image. What this means is the picture itself will not save in Illustrator. So when you save your file and you're done, you need to make sure that along with that Illustrator file, you bring a copy of all of your pictures with you as well. So a good suggestion there is to leave your Illustrator file in the same folder that contains all of your images. If you're a bit worried about things going missing, you can click on an image once you've placed it in, and up in your context bar there's a button there that says Embed. If you embed the image, you'll notice the cross goes off the top of the picture, and now that is an object that's actually saved inside your Illustrator file. That's definitely a safe way of working, but just be aware that if you embed all of your images into your Illustrator file, it's going to make that document quite large. So, and by large I mean in terms of storage space, so just keep that in mind. If your file management is good, and you don't move your files around too much, and you keep your Illustrator file in the same folder as all of your letter forms, as all your photos, sorry, you should be okay. But if you want to play it safe, you might consider embedding those images. Now that's put that image on layer 1. So if you look at your layers panel towards the bottom of your screen on the right, or you can go to Window and Layers if you can't see it, you'll see that layer 1 currently contains this image. Once you've put your first letter form in, I would suggest you actually draw the guides that you need. So if you're doing lowercase, it says in the brief you need the baseline and the X height. If it's a uppercase alphabet you're doing, then you'll need the baseline and the cap height to put in. And we want you to draw those in basically as I would normally suggest guides, but for the purposes of this project, we'll just draw a line that will do that. So looking at your layers, while we're here, I would suggest double-clicking on layer 1 and renaming that to your, let's say, your photos or your images or something like that. And then using the Create New button, we would create a new layer on top of that. And I'm going to call this Guides, or you might call it Measurements or something along those lines. With your Guides layer there, I would suggest getting your Line tool. You'll see that near your pen tool. You'll see just a straight line segment tool there. You can click on that. And looking at the swatches, I would suggest you make this line fairly brightly colored, so maybe like a magenta or something like that for the stroke color. And to draw a line, you simply click and drag, and you can hold down Shift to keep that perfectly horizontal. And then that go like so. So basically what we're doing there is just drawing in a line, and I'm trying to make that the baseline. So I'm just going to line this up with my picture. Come here, you. One thing you might consider is if you're dealing with a letter form with a curved bottom, it does have what's called overshoot, which is where the curved bottom descends below the baseline slightly. Maybe you want to put this guide in later with a character like an H or an X or something which has a flat bottom, because the flat bottom of those characters sits directly on the baseline. You might notice if you're doing a lowercase a, the stem of the A will likely sit on the baseline, but the bowl or the little curve on the A will probably sit a bit below it. And that's called overshoot. It's there for visual balance. You might want to look that term up as it pertains to typography. Anyway, we've drawn a line there on the guides layer, which is going to be our baseline. And for a lowercase alphabet, you also need your X height as well. So I'm just going to grab this line here, hold down Option, because remember, if you hold down Option when you move something, it duplicates it. And we'll put a line up there for the X height. Once again, I'm leaving a little bit of overshoot there because it is a curved character. If you are doing lowercase letters, it might not be a bad idea to start with your letter X, because it sits on the baseline and the X height is defined by the top of the lowercase letter X. So that might make it a bit easier. Go away, notifications. The reason I'm suggesting we do this with lines rather than guides in the software is because you'll probably need to do a couple of lines of these. So once you've drawn those two in and you're happy with that measurement, we want to keep that measurement between the two consistent. So I'm going to grab those two lines, and then I'm going to hold down Option and drag them downwards. And that gives us a second set, and then I'll do that once more. Gives us a third set. So now I can fit the entire alphabet on the page. And we've made it so that the distance between the baseline and the X height is the same for each set of characters we're going to do. Once that's done, I'm going to just go back to my Layers panel and click on that little empty space next to the eyeball there to lock that guides layer. Then we'll go back to the photos, and you can go ahead and start placing in the rest of your characters. You've got some guidelines now to help you, so you'll know where to position those images and how to size them to keep the baseline and the X height consistent. So we'll go to File and Place. I've got my double story G there. You might need to do some research into baseline and X height if you're unsure. If you've got a double story G like this, it can be a little bit deceptive. You might think that the top story of the G sits on the baseline, but actually if you do some research, you'll notice that's not the case. The baseline often sits sort of in the middle of the bar for the bottom story, or sometimes the bottom story actually sits on the baseline itself. So the X height will be the top of the bowl for the top story. And the bottom story will sit there like that, so that's pretty good. Oh yeah, and I might just embed that image too. File and Place. And I've got the lowercase letter y there. And we'll just scale that down like so. So a bit more tricky with a round, an angled or skewed character like this. Just average out your X height as best you can. And don't forget about the overshoot if you have a curved character. So it might be something along those lines. It's looking like I may have to move some of these lines by unlocking my guides layer and moving them around. We'll see how we go, but I've got a fairly long descender there, which is kind of getting in the way. And we'll embed that one. Now, like I say, if this was your uppercase alphabet, let me just place in an uppercase character here. File and place. Oh, that's a small one. The guides you draw in would be for your baseline and your cap height, respectively. So it's a little bit easier, I suppose, with caps. You're doing one or the other, so just choose what those guides refer to. Now, once you have your whole alphabet laid out photographically, hopefully in order as well, I would suggest that you go to your photos layer and you lock that layer. That will prevent you from accidentally moving those images around. And then finally, you will be able to create a new layer, which you might like to drag to the top of all of them. And you can rename that your tracing or your vector or something along those lines. And this is where you'll start tracing those characters. At this stage, you can proceed with your pen tool, your shape tools, whatever we discussed in those previous videos to start creating these letter forms. One final thing that I might suggest here to help you get this all constructed is with your photos layer, if you double click on that layer to bring up the layer options panel, there is the option to, at least temporarily, turn that into a template layer. When you do that and press OK, it is going to dim that layer slightly. You'll notice the layer becomes italicized as well. This is useful because the dimmer images don't get in the way, I guess, of you being able to view the pen tool and your shapes as much. One thing that can also come up as well is when you're drawing your shapes on the tracing layer to get this constructed, if by default your pen tool has, like say, a fill color attached to it, sometimes that can get in the way of you seeing what you're doing. If that is the case, there is a shortcut, Command or Control Y, which takes you into what's called outline mode, and you can see that next to the name of your file up there. When you're in outline mode, it will show you your shapes without a stroke or a fill on them, so you can just see the basic outline, and that's really good for tracing. You need to have your photos layer set to template for that tracing mode to work. If you don't have that photos layer set to template, when you press Command or Control Y to go to outline mode, you can see your pictures disappear. But if you have a template layer, those images don't disappear. And that makes life a bit easier when it comes to doing your tracing. So Command or Control Y to switch in and out of outline mode. Just make sure that you double click on your photos layer to change it from being a template or not being a template. I'm just going to make a quick pause here, do some characters, and then I'll show you how you finish this up. Actually, instead of a pause, we'll cover finishing this up in the next and final video.